Did Annabelle escape? The haunted Conjuring house up for grabs. They say some houses keep their memories. Not the nice ones, birthdays, anniversaries, laughter, but the small, shameful records, a scuff on the banister, a wine stain on the floor, the faint outline of a handprint on a window that refuses to explain itself. The Conjuring house kept those memories like a ledger, and it was always ready to add entries. When the for sale sign went up, everyone laughed. A bargain in a quiet town. An estate sale. Move-in ready, they said. The word that rolled through the town at first was curiosity. Then it became hunger. Then, quietly, it became fear, because someone, somewhere, had whispered a question that spread like mold under wallpaper. Did Annabelle escape? Before we go deeper, take a moment to steady your breath. Make sure the lights are low, the doors are locked, and you're ready to listen, because once this story begins, it doesn't stop. And if you enjoy walking through the dark with me, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Shadow's Lair. It's a small thing, really, just a click, but in places like these, every small action changes what listens back. Subscribe. Now, let's open the door. The listing was banal: 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, wraparound porch, original hardwood. Built in the 1940s, freshly painted in a neutral gray. Photographs were bright and staged: a sunlit living room, neutral throw pillows, a vase of tulips on the mantel. No one took the photos of the attic, the cellar, or the little plywood box in the corner of the basement that had been painted white and locked with a third-hand padlock. No one was allowed to photograph the plywood box in the old police files either. That detail, like a loose thread, had been quietly removed from the public record years before. But town gossip never dies, it just goes furtive. The house had a name in rumor: the Conjuring house. A handful of old men at the diner still called it that between coffee sips, eyes dipping to the window where rain tapped without invitation. They told the story of a century-old rumor, a doll, a seance, a long list of misfortunes, and the men who came to say they had seen things. The story usually grew in the telling, as such stories do, but everyone agreed on one stubborn detail: a small, handcrafted doll called Annabelle had once lived in that plywood box. Until she didn't, there was a kerfuffle on the local news that winter. A documentary team visited, asked neighbors questions, filmed the creaky porch at dusk. They filmed the house in flattering light and then, either by accident or design, included a fleeting shot of the attic window. Later, a frame-by-frame analysis, because of course there was, showed something pale in the glass like a face pressed to the inside. The clip rattled across message boards. Old myths woke up. The listing, when it posted months later, carried with it the weight of 1,000 watchers. Enter our protagonist, Meera Rao, 32, freelance restorer of old houses and, for reasons she could not name, a collector of ignored stories. She specialized in saving architecture neglected by time, plasterwork, stained glass, the kind of craft people throw away when they get tired of reverence. Meera liked the bones of a thing. She liked to clean out closets, to find what the world had left behind and to make it useful again. She saw the listing and felt that old tickle of curiosity. A fixer-upper, close enough to the station for weekend visits. Low price, suspiciously low. She made an offer the same week. The first night in the Conjuring house was the kind of cold that seems engineered to test newcomers. Rain slatted the windows. The electricity hummed and fluttered in a nervous rhythm, like a giant animal shifting its weight. Mira unpacked boxes of tools and paint, placed a pot on the stove, and told herself she would not think about the stories. She told herself that stories were for other people. That night she found the attic key. It was small, brass, and tucked behind a loose brick in the fireplace, as if the old house itself had decided it was time someone opened the attic again. The attic smelled of cedar dust and old paper. Light from Myra's headlamp skittered over trunks, a child's wooden rocking horse with one ear chewed, a chintz armchair, and, half buried under a moth-eaten blanket, a wooden doll chest with a small, painted face on its lid. The chest was normal enough to be suspicious, naive, hand-painted flowers, a latch corroded with age. On the lid, someone had scratched a single letter in small, impatient strokes, A. She set the chest on the floor, then pushed it aside to get at the joists. When she came back, sleeves rolled up, she told herself she had misremembered. The chest was farther down the attic than she had placed it. She shrugged and laughed alone in the dark, the laugh a too bright sound that hummed like condensation. For 3 nights there were whispers at the edge of sleep. Not words at first, just the memory of a phrase. Did Annabelle escape? The phrase grew in her mind like ivy. On the 4th night, Mira found a note card tucked in a baseboard behind the staircase. The script was childlike and angular, the ink browned with age. It read, "She wanted to be loved. We tried to keep her safe." Mira called the real estate agent the next morning. He stammered and said there were no prior occupants listed for the last 10 years, only a brief sale to a collector, who had later donated the doll to a museum and then, well. He said it like he had rehearsed it. He said the word donated like an offering. Donation records were messy things, especially where myth had been scrubbed. Myra's research unearthed nothing on the museum's site. She found a single, blurred photograph in an archived newspaper, a doll in a glass case, a label printed with a precise curator's font. The caption used the word artifact. Nobody, as far as the paper said, was harmed. Nobody, in the paper's tidy narrative, seemed to remember the nights when street lamps went out, when dogs howled in unison, when the church bell tolled long and wrong. Those details lived in the town's nighttime rumor, where facts have edges. One night, while cataloging chipped paint swatches, Mira woke to the sound of tiny footsteps on the roof. She assumed rain again, pigeons, raccoons. She walked to the window in her pajamas, breath fogging on the glass, and saw in the garden a small silhouette between the tulips and the hydrangeas. It stood like a sentinel, impossibly still. It looked like a child. It was not moving. She blinked. It was gone. Later, in the safety of infinite daylight, photographs showed nothing unusual in the garden. But under the skylight, in a smear of bird droppings, someone had traced a small letter, as if with a fingertip, A. Mira began to ask around. Old women in the bakery paused kneading dough to lower their voices. A postal worker told her with a wink that the house was best left be. A man at the hardware store offered a disposable camera, for proof, he said, and then added, almost embarrassed, or for your peace of mind. The more Mira asked, the more stories stitched themselves together, a villainous tale about a dollmaker who had carved a soul into bits of pine and twine, a seance where someone had gone too far, a woman who had named the doll and then cried over it in a basement room no cameras saw. There were mentions of a white box and of men from a religious order who had come with holy water and a vanishing certificate. There were laughable explanations, mice, echoing pipes, suggestion, and there were quiet, fearful ones whose voices dropped to a hush before the word Annabelle could leave their lips. One night, an elderly woman named Elise, who had been a child living 2 houses down, knocked and pushed open Myra's door as if she had permission. Elise was gaunt and quick, her hands a map of veins and decades. She sat without asking and said plainly, "You ought to know she wasn't a toy." Elise told Myra about a girl's voice on a long-ago phone line, about a lullaby that stitched itself to the wallpaper, about the weeks the family unwound. "We said prayers," Elise said. "Candles, names. Names, names. They told us to lock her away. We did. We thought that would be enough." Elise stared at Myra, her eyes soft and terrible. "We were wrong," she said. "Some things bind to the wanting. Not to the wood. Not to the dress. Wanting is a live thing." Myra asked what Elise meant. Elise shook her head slowly. "You'll hear her want. It's the sound you'll have to guard against. When something is wanted enough, it learns to find a way." On a rain-slick night, Myra decided to open the plywood box in the cellar. She took a flashlight, a crowbar, and a steadying gulp of courage. The cellar smelled of damp, of old onions, of the kind of cold that seems like absence. The box sat under the stairs like an apology. Its padlock hung rusty and unassuming. She pried it open. Inside, swaddled in faded muslin, there was nothing. No doll. No lace. No crooked face painted by a human hand. Only an old Polaroid photograph curling at the edges and a scrap of paper folded tight like a secret. The photograph showed the very house, porch, steps, a pair of bicycles leaning against a post. In the foreground, a small figure stood with arms at its sides. The face had been scratched out of the image with heavy pressure, flat gouges in the emulsion. On the back of the photograph, faint in pencil, someone had written 5 words: "She left at dusk, but what?" The scrap of paper read, in a careful, adult hand, "She leaves when the wanting is fed. Lock the wanting. Lock the door. Don't answer the voice." Myra felt foolishly relieved. A reasonable explanation, a family frightened into myth. They had hidden the doll to protect, perhaps to punish. They left a note for future inhabitants the way people leave instructions for bakers or pet sitters. She slid the photograph and note into her jacket and climbed the stairs, humming to itself the illusion of safety. That night, she dreamt of small hands tapping on the inside of her skull. The tapping learned rhythm and then language. When she woke, an echo of a music box was on her bedside table, where none had been before. The melody was simple, and the tune turned like a child's promise into a question. Later, in the living room, the television flicked on for a second and then died. Across the room, the mantel clock, stuck at 3:16 since she bought the house, slid a hand forward by a single minute. The wanting is a subtle parasite. It doesn't shout, it coaxes. A voice enters one's life in the tone of something familiar, the lost friend, a favored lullaby, the taste of sugar when one is fasting. It offers the single thing a person desires most and then asks for a trade, a piece of attention, a glance, an indulgence. At first it's small. At first it seems benign. And yet, with each indulgence, the cost grows. Mira discovered this in incremental cruelty. A misplaced key. A missing shoe. A picture frame turned to face the wall. Small items went, and each time there was a reason she found later. The neighbor needed it, the city reclaimed it, it was merely misplaced. But with the missing came a warmth. A feeling like relief, like someone had finally acknowledged her. The wanting tasted of being seen. She started to hear names in the wind. Not her name. Other names. Names she had loved and forgotten. Names that tugged on the soft scars no one else could see. The sound formed around her and made her skin feel like paper. Mira went to the museum referenced in the old clipping. The building had closed quietly years ago, its marble remnants scavenged for new projects. In a storage facility 2 towns over, under a fluorescent hum, she met a woman named Dr. Lenora Hale, curator once, archivist always. Dr. Hale had retired but had kept a small keyring and a memory as precise as a scalpel. In 1998, Dr. Hale said, "We did receive a private donation. It was small, inconsequential. A doll, crafted by skilled hands, but not significant in the context of our collection. The donor insisted they had a story. We catalogued it as domestic artifact. It stayed in a drawer. Did you ever exhibit it?" Mira asked. Dr. Hale smiled a small, clinical smile. "We did not. Some items don't belong in glass cases. They belong in libraries, in notes and files and quiet nights." It was removed from display. Mira asked about the label. The same curator's font, the same tidy caption. Dr. Hale's face softened. "There was a man from an order," she said. "They took the doll for safekeeping, claimed there were complications." She used the word complications the way a gardener says weather. "They brought back a certificate. We filed it under donations withdrawn." Did the order ever say why? Mira asked. "No," Dr. Hale said. "But they did not return the little box. They left a letter requesting anonymity and suggested that the artifact had stressful properties. We accepted their request. There was a public record of the withdrawal, mundane and legal, names, dates, signatures. But the signature of the man from the order was a shaky, reticent thing, like the end of a life. Mira traced the ink with her thumb. Beneath the legal language were 2 easily missed lines scrawled by another hand. "It is not the doll. It is what we fed it. We couldn't say no." E. Who was E? Elise? A neighbor? A guardian? The letters seemed like breadcrumbs stretching back through the house. Someone, it seemed, had tried and failed to stop the thing that wanted. Then Mira heard the voice, not at first as a voice, but as a possibility, a tune becoming syllables. A late-night phone call. A child's laughter captured and slowed. The voice was patient and precise, it never barged in. It came in the found hours between 2 and 4 in the morning, a time when the brain is soft and rumor feels real. The voice called in different cadences. Sometimes it was an old friend she had lost to middle school. Sometimes it was the voice of a mother remembering a lullaby. Once, it sounded exactly like the old tinny voice from a cassette tape she had often listened to as a teenager, telling a silly story about a cat. "Come play," the voice said one night. as Mira lay under layers of quilts and thought of nothing important. The voice was not demanding. It was an offering shaped like sugar. She did not get up. The next night, a child's small shadow moved down the hall. Not a full apparition, but the impression of presence, the smell of cotton, the small, faint dusting of flour on a child's shoe. A toy train's faint track hummed in the basement. A single toy, a wooden spool with a painted face, the kind you twist, reappeared on her kitchen counter though she had never bought one. Mira set rules. She refused to answer calls at night. She did not open the attic. She performed small rituals, the kind Elise had recommended, candles. A circle of salt at the door, an old hymn hummed under her breath. The rituals seemed to make sense for a while. But the wanting is a patient thing. It is less a predator than a teacher of bad manners. It instructs you slowly in how to fail. One morning she woke to find her phone scrolled to a message she had not typed. It read, simply, "We missed you. Play now." The message was unsigned. The timestamp was 3:17 a.m. Mira found that resisting made the voice louder. Not in volume, but in persistence. The voice adapted. It learned her tastes and offered them like gifts. It would remind her of a song she'd forgotten, present a recipe she'd loved, recreate a warmth of a presence she once had. Each reminder was small mercy and big demand. She thought of Elisa's words, "The wanting is the live thing." She realized the haunting was not simply an object but a habit, built over time, fed by small indulgences until it was thick enough to walk outdoors. Mira prepared a final confrontation not with faith or force, but with an experiment. She would sit in the living room, lights off, and refuse the voice anything. No hints given. No indulgences. She set a camera, she recorded audio. She wrote in a notebook every time she wanted to answer and didn't. She would test whether refusing could starve the wanting. The night she chose was a thunderous one. The house was a drum. Mira sat with a cup of tea grown cold, a notebook, and a vow. Midnight came and then 1 a.m. At 2:17 a.m. the voice began, not a child, not an anthem, but the thin, patient voice of a friend calling on the phone, a voice offering the exact comfort she craved, companionship. A sense of being needed. The voice named her childhood nickname. It promised stories, a secret, a way to patch a small loneliness. Mira kept her eyes open. She wrote in the notebook, 3 once resisted. The voice made bargains, bring me a little trinket, look through this drawer, turn on the porch light. She said no. Outside, somewhere, a car alarm faded and a dog barked. The voice's tone canted, as if losing footing. It shifted, then tried charm, then it tried fear. They are coming, it said. If you don't answer, they'll take me away. For a moment the voice spun a picture of rescue as threat. It was a cruel mimicry of human politics. Speak to save me, speak and be absolved. Mira felt the pull. It was physical, a pressure like thirst. But she did not move. At 3:18 a.m., the voice sobbed once. It was a sound that made her chest ache for reasons she could not fully place. She remembered Elisa's eyes and the line, "We tried to keep her safe." Something in that phrasing had been a warning and an apology both. You cannot imprison the wanting without starving the life of those who love it, a sorry calculus of binding. She rose, walked to the cellar, and placed the Polaroid and the note back into the plywood box. She locked it with the old padlock and placed it where it had been found, under the stairs. Then she took her notebook and wrote a single line across the first page in heavy ink, "We will not answer." In the morning, sunlight found its way through rain-dimmed glass. Neighbors waved politely when they saw the new curtains. Elise stopped by, hands folded, and spoke no lectures. She only said, gently, "We do what we can." When Mira listened back to her recordings, she found in the audio a single additional track, between the breaths, a small voice, not a child's exactly, not wholly human, whispering a name that might have been Mira. The voice said, with a tone like someone both relieved and disappointed, "See you soon." Mira kept the house. She kept the box closed. She wrote the story into a blog post and then removed it, preferring the ledger of her own memory to public spectacle. She never heard the voice again in the voice form she first had, but at nights, a tiny pattern would appear on the fog of her bathroom mirror, a childlike handprint, traced from the outside of the glass, where no one stood. A tulip leaning one extra degree toward the window. A single spool toy waiting on the counter. Had Annabelle escaped? Mira could not answer that with certainty. The thing that had once been kept in a box had learned how to wear faces and became less about wood and more about desire. To ask whether Annabelle had escaped is to ask whether a story can ever stop when everyone is willing to read it. The town grew used to the house in a mild, wary way. New for sale signs appeared for other properties. People learned the rhythms of not asking too many questions and of lowering the voice when they passed the Conjuring house. Mira learned to write lists and to cross things off. She learned to notice the difference between being wanted and being loved. She learned, slowly, like a person learning to breathe again after a scare, that some things can be managed, not by seeking to annihilate them, but by refusing to feed the hunger that made them vast. And on certain nights, when fog pressed itself against the panes and the tulips bowed in the garden, Mira would hear, like a bird testing the season, the faintest of knockings at the frame of the front door. The sound was delicate, like a doll's finger tapping on wood. She would pause, hold her breath, and choose to breathe out instead. She would let the wanting knock and not unlock, because some doors, once opened, are easier to close if they are left unopened in the first place.